Welcome back to the Hardware Unboxed podcast. I think we're up to episode 81. We haven't done a podcast for like a month, so everything's a bit of a mess around here, but we're going to be talking about quite a lot of topics in this one because we haven't done a podcast for a while. We're going to be talking about YouTube views. You might have seen some videos from other creators talking about weird things happening on the YouTube platform, so we'll be getting into that as well. We'll be talking about CPUs and CPU platforms and upcoming CPU rumors and things with Zen 6 and Zen 7 and upcoming Intel platforms. We talk about Intel GPUs a bit. We talk about like 6-core, 8-core stuff. We talk about NVIDIA GPU rumors. It is a jam-packed episode. And then for people that were interested about why we were away for a few weeks, it's because I went on holiday. I do talk about the holiday as well in the Boring Life section for the people that have been asking questions about that. So yeah, let's get into it. The podcast is back, Steve. Well, I'm back to do the podcast, so we're doing the podcast again. We probably would have done it last week, except I was a little sick, got a bit of a sore throat coming back from international travel, which is kind of what happens sometimes. So couldn't really speak too well, delayed a few videos and stuff, but feeling okay this time. We're back. We're going to talk about random stuff. So
good.
How's things? How's YouTube been while we've been away?
Well, YouTube's been interesting. We'll probably touch on that. But in terms of work and whatever, going really well. Got a lot of good videos coming up, I reckon. So enjoying all of that. Some interesting products here and there. And I've, done quite a few different things over the past few weeks. I had Jared come and stay for a couple of days. That was a lot of fun. So Jared, Balin and myself, we got up to a bit of mischief, created at least one video. So that was good. I've been doing some other projects, working on my other daughter's bedroom, Tessa's. So I'm sure some of you will have seen Zoe's bedroom build on the main channel. I'm not doing a video for this one because it's not like tech PC related. She doesn't want that sort of stuff. It's a different thing. So, and probably two of them on the channel in the space of a few months was a bit much, but we are going to do an overhaul of Balin's end of the desk where sort of a radical overhaul Bale and I have planned, which will probably happen in roughly 2 months' time. So there will be like a do-it-yourself type thing in the office. So for those of you who like that, that'll be coming up. But that's sort of been me over the last few weeks. And I mean, I kind of want to hear what you've been up to, but I don't think it's appropriate for the podcast because it's not at all boring life stuff. So I think we have to talk about that in private.
We'll talk about that once we hit pause on the old the old recording. No, I'll talk about that in the Boring Life section a little bit. Won't go too crazy on it, but
dumb it down. Don't get too excited. No, make it sound as boring as you can.
Yes, I'll talk about being on the plane, being on trains, that sort of thing. All the most exciting parts.
We want to hear about that.
Went on a European holiday. We'll talk about that a bit later on. We'll start with the YouTube stuff, which is sort of not something we would normally talk about, I guess, just like personal YouTube gripes and having to deal with, YouTube related stuff. We deal with that internally, obviously, performance of videos and stuff like that. But it's been talked about by a lot of YouTubers. You might have seen Linus talk about it on the WAN show, a couple of videos. I watched the LMG clips versions of those. But it spread beyond that into lots of other videos. I watched one earlier today from Ludwig, who's a major, game streamer. So many channels talking about this sort of weird view thing that's happening on YouTube, at least with some channels. Linus has talked about views being effectively halved on his channel, at least the LTT main channel. Not sure about the other channels. And you messaged me while I was away. I wasn't paying any attention to the channel, really. I think I had like one monitors video scheduled. I checked in on that. I was like, that's doing okay. I sort of looked every once in a while just to make sure, things were ticking over. And then, towards the end of the holiday, you messaged me being like, the channel's broken. I'm like, nice.
It's like when one of us goes on a holiday, the inevitable happens.
Yeah, that's right. So a couple of years ago, you went on a holiday, and it wasn't even like an international holiday or anything. You just went to another state in Australia.
It was because it was just unfortunate timing, wrong place, wrong time type deal. Remember when, and this actually happened to Linus, they were hijacking YouTube channels. A lot of YouTube channels got hijacked because people were offering to give them money. And you know how much YouTubers like money. So that's just temptation right there. And if you go for the bait, they send you like a program. I don't know why people would execute this stuff, but executes a program, scrubs, your YouTube credentials, and then they can log in. They're targeting big channels like LTT, so then they can run like crypto scams and stuff, live stream that to their millions, and basically scam people. So because that was happening at alarming rates, they changed the way. So if someone logged into a channel from an unknown location or something, there was suspicious activity detected, then it would trigger this security measure that would stop you from being able to live stream. I think you could upload new content, but it wouldn't be shown to anyone. So it would effectively shadow ban, like shadow block. I think it was like the last 3 months of content. And
yeah, that's right.
Only your backlog could be seen.
That's right. You could go to like the Hardware Unboxed channel page, and you would only see like the latest video being shown was from 3 months ago, and any of the content, if you search for it, it just wouldn't show up. Now you could get to those videos through direct links because they were still visible and live on the platform. Just the reach was
like unlisted. Yeah, they're basically unlisted. So your views dropped and everything because your last 3 months of work disappeared. And the reason they did that was a sort of a countermeasure to stop people from hijacking your channel and then being able to live stream or upload new content that could potentially scam your audience. So that's good, except the problem was it was overly sensitive, and multiple channels, especially like travel channels and stuff like that, ran into the problem that we have. And when you run into a problem on YouTube, it is unknown territory. You are wading into some scary waters there, because we heard from guys that had this happen and they were still trying to get back their channel with hundreds of thousands of subscribers for months. And you were just pinging the messages out into the YouTube abyss, hoping to get a ping back. Fortunately, YouTube acted, well, for YouTube, I'd say they acted light speed. For us, I think was it 4
days like 2
or something? I can't remember.
I think 2 weeks, was it? I think the whole thing
I thought it was resolved within the week that I was away. I forget.
Oh, it could have been. Yeah, it could have been.
Put it this way. It happened in it happened inside of a month. And I feel like you should consider yourself lucky in that scenario, because you send a support message to YouTube and you might get back, we'll look into it, or we're looking into it, or, whatever. And then.
And I think at that time, it was even worse than it is now in terms of the contact with YouTube, even though we were a 1 million sub channel or whatever. Back then there was like no one at YouTube. Like I think just by chance we happened to have at that time, we were part of some program or something that meant we did have a YouTube email. These days they've got like a live chat support and an email that you could use, which is still not great, but it's better than nothing. Like there is actually something you can use to contact, which we did do when YouTube deleted the English track of our channel one time. Right. And so the videos were automatically dubbed into Spanish, and then the English just wasn't there. So I contacted them and they're like, okay, we'll fix that. And then occasionally you can contact them to reprocess videos that have broken and stuff like that. And they get on that eventually. But yeah, like there's no person specifically that we have, at a channel of our size. I think you have to be, a couple of tiers above that before you start getting those sorts of contacts. I think even Linus has said in the past that they don't have great contact with YouTube, and they're obviously a much larger channel. So anyway, that happened back then. That wasn't an issue for us. These days, they've also changed a few of those processes. So if you do go overseas, they just kind of trigger, like when you try log into the channel at a new location, they trigger extra 2-factor stuff to try and prove that you are who you say you are. You can't just use existing logged in credentials to manipulate the channel. You have to prove yourself again, which, when I logged into the channel overseas, that's exactly what I had to do, and it didn't really make any difference. So that's how things work now. But however, it seems that in a completely unrelated situation to that, YouTube has made some changes that have affected views in the past month or so at this point, I would have said. I think since about August 12th or 13th, seems that they've made some changes, which has caused, and you might have seen this if you're a fan of the channel and you browse our channel page a lot, you might have noticed that views on videos are not as strong as they were a couple of months ago, especially on videos that at least we internally would have expected to do better than they have. Obviously, we don't always know how well video is going to perform. Like some things bomb when we're not expecting them to, and some things perform much better than we expect them to. But I think there's now enough evidence across the videos we've produced that channel performance is down, exactly the same as Online's Tech Tips channel. And many others have talked about this. Skill Up is a big gaming channel, has talked about this. And it seems that some of these, I think in Ludwig had a video as well where he shows I'm not sure whether it's his channel specifically or a channel, that's part of his group of friends, showed, this sort of weird performance characteristics. And basically that's been affecting us as well. I'm not sure whether it's every channel on YouTube, but certainly something has changed to affect views. So that's currently in the position that we're in. I don't know whether you have any initial thoughts before I sort of talk about some of the stats and stuff, but
not really. It's like from a personal perspective, it's a little bit frustrating because we don't care too much about the views and stuff on the channel, and the channel's been doing, I suppose, better than ultimately we need it to do in order to keep doing what it is that we do. So that's fortunate. But, we do offer in-stream advertising and stuff like that Balin organizes, and we tend to like to have a rough guidance on targets and stuff like that, especially for Balin. It makes his job easier. And he does get like a sales commission on that. So it's good if it's beneficial for everyone if that works out well. And previously, like if you go back 3 weeks, a bad video for us would have been about 90,000 views, 100,000 views. Most of the videos, looking back through the channel, 120, 140, 160, 200 plus. So yeah, I would say we were typically aiming for 100,000 views a video. And we were kind of getting that. And then we uploaded, I think it was probably the first video to really bomb was the GPU CPU scaling, the Core Ultra 7 265K, which admittedly that video was a bit of an unknown to me because whenever we have, we lead a video with Intel or Core Ultra or Core i5, Core i7, it tends to bomb. People just are extremely uninterested in the Intel stuff at this point in time. And you'll even see channels that heavily focus on sort of the Intel CPU stuff. They're just not getting the views because people really want Ryzen. For example, if I did like a Ryzen 5 versus Ryzen 7 or Ryzen 5 7600X versus 9600 content piece, that would do significantly better than an Intel AMD comparison, which historically has not been the case.
Yeah.
So I put that video out thinking, this should do okay. This should get at least sort of our bare minimum views. And I think it went out and it did like a third of our bare minimum views. So it's like, wow, people really don't care about the Core Ultra 7. And the Core Ultra 7 has dropped in price, the 265K. Pretty good value, really, like not terrible. It's certainly getting to the point where it's kind of worth considering. There's a few things to unpack there, but I thought it would do okay. It bombed. And then we had the B850 motherboard roundup, which is a content piece I've been working on for over 3 months. I don't even know how many man hours between Balin and I were put into that video. Massive video, and that bombed even harder. Thankfully, that's the kind of content that will do well on search over time, so that video should be fine. It's already doubled in views over the last 2 weeks just from search results, so that's okay. But still should have done it, I would say, about 3 times better than it did. And then we've had other videos that are, I think, at best, sort of half the views that we would normally get, and some are worse than that. And then, but it's somewhat comforting to know that so many channels are seeing the same thing. Like, it's not just... So, and Linus talked about, the smart ass response would be, oh, get good, or, your content, you're falling off, you suck, or whatever, you're not doing as good a job, which, may or may not be true. But that's something that happens with more progression. Like, you'll see the views slowly start to slide, and you'll get feedback as well. Like, people will be like, the benchmark videos aren't as in-depth, or you're not doing something as good as you were doing previously. And so it's sort of, you'll see the fall off over probably like a 12-month period. Whereas for us, we had a video do 130,000 views, then 90,000 views, and then 60, and then 30, and then 40, 40, 30. It's like, what the hell? Just like that, we couldn't get over like 50,000 views in 24 hours, whereas normally we were doing around 100. So that was kind of cause for alarm what's gone wrong there. But yeah, like I said, when we see that other channels are experiencing the same thing, it's like, well, it's a YouTube thing.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't want to, make it sound like we're complaining about views, which Linus said in his video as well. Like, we're in a very lucky position to get those sorts of views that we were talking about previously, and having them affected now is just YouTuber stuff. The only reason we're sort of bringing this up in the podcast is firstly because there seems to be a lot of interest in this. The views on videos about this have been reasonably good. Like, people seem quite interested in Linus talking about it. And
the irony, the views are bad, but if you talk
the views are bad, but if you talk about the views being bad, the views are good. So anyway, I just thought, it'll be interesting, especially because we've been watching this content. And so hopefully it'll help out other YouTubers and sort of, get the word out there a bit about what's going on. I've looked into it a bit, been talking to the people from LTT as well about it, who've, shared some things as well. So everyone's sort of looking into it and trying to figure out what's going on. But yeah, like the whole, your content just sucks now. There's pretty clear statistical evidence in the analytics that shows the drop-off being effectively immediate, and that just doesn't really happen with... like sometimes we know when we produce videos that are like not that interesting. Like
when you do, mine are always brilliant. Just want to make that clear.
Sure, whatever.
Just want to make that clear.
On Monster Unbox, for example, we always know that the reviews, for example, some of them are going to do a lot better than others based on the popularity of those particular types of products or whatever. So, we've been doing this for a long time. We're sort of very familiar with stuff we expect to do better and worse, and the things we need to do to keep the channel going and keep you interested, which I think is why the channel is still largely viewed by people. If we fell off, but then, we wouldn't be sitting here making podcasts and stuff. We'd be doing something else. So anyway, just want to get all that out of the way. We'll talk now about the sort of things that we've found as to the potential causes for this in the analytics. We might show some things in the video as well. Now, the things that Linus brought up were things like, while views are down, or a lot of other metrics are not, which is quite unusual. Usually when views go down, like a video bombs, for example, you see likes being lower on that video, comments being lower. If we had links in the description, those links would be clicked less, especially if we were able to track that. We would see a whole bunch of impacts to other statistics around that you can see in the channel, like impressions. The videos wouldn't be being served as much to people because there's low interest in them. And at least what LTT sort of pointed out, and what that we've seen as well, is that isn't impacted. The like ratio on videos is actually now higher than it was before, indicating that we're getting about the same number of likes as we were previously, except that the actual views are lower. We're making the same amount of money that we were previously, except that the views are lower. So, previously we might make X amount of dollars on a 100,000 view video. And if we made a 50,000 view video, we'd expect to get roughly half as much. Except now a 50,000 view video is giving us the same amount of revenue as previous 100,000 view videos. And so the amount of money that we're making per view has gone up significantly, which is very unusual to happen. That would indicate that, if it was just like an audience thing, suddenly I guess people who watch a lot of ads are like suddenly all the audience, and then the people that don't watch the ads or have ad block enabled are suddenly not watching the channel, which doesn't really make any sense. So firstly, we sort of noticed that. I also noticed in the analytics that on a very specific date, the amount of views that we get and the amount of monetized playbacks, which is when YouTube thinks that they've served an ad on that view, because obviously some people use ad block, or a video doesn't have an ad on it for whatever reason. So YouTube splits that out in the analytics. They say these are the total views and these are the views that we were able to serve ads on. And for the entire history of the channel, those two graphs have been absolutely identical. Not the numbers, because obviously the estimated monetized views have been lower, but the two graphs have been 100% correlated. We get a certain number of views, a percentage of that are monetized. On that specific date in August, suddenly those two figures are decoupled, which suggests that for some reason, the monetized views are the same, but the not monetized views are not, which is very strange. We also had a look into things like what viewing sources people have. Like, is it mobile phones? Is it desktop PCs? And we found that, as well as something that Ludwig showed in his video, is that desktop views are way down, but mobile views are not. So mobile views pretty much flat, desktop views significantly down. And they're actually very significantly down on Linux for some reason, which is only a very small percentage of our viewer base, about 1 or 2%. But the views on Linux were sort of like pretty normal views with each video. Now it's like a flat line. It's almost 0 views from Linux, which is very bizarre. However, things like impressions from desktop views. So an impression on YouTube is when you're served a video thumbnail or title. It has to be shown on screen a certain percentage in time. But effectively, YouTube tracks that as well. So you can see, my video was shown to people 1,000,000 times, and then 5% of the time people clicked on it. We got the certain number of views from that. So that's a very important metric. You want to make sure your videos are getting shown across YouTube. And impressions on desktops are pretty much exactly the same before and after this sort of change. So we're sort of narrowing it down to this position where our views, their likes are normal, monetized playbacks are looking normal, impressions are looking normal, comments normal, revenue normal, views are down. So what's going on there? It seems to be that for some reason YouTube are not counting or not serving views to people who aren't monetized, so don't see ads, don't like the videos or comment or click our affiliate links or anything in the description, are on desktop PC, but for some reason they're still being shown the videos on desktop PC. So they're like a non-impression view, which I don't even know how that happens. And so, there's just in a very strange position there in terms of what's been happening on the channel from a very specific date. So it looks to me, now, I guess I've got a couple of theories. We obviously never know anything for sure. Now, one theory is that, when we talk about things like not monetized views, not liking or commenting, potentially not going to videos from an impression, sounds like a bot, right? Like they're just a person that's not engaging and has probably got ad block enabled. That makes sense. They're probably just removing bot views. I guess that's one particular angle. However, there's a couple of things that sort of fly in the face of that. One of them is that the amount of views being removed, not counted on the channel per day, changes based on the popularity of videos. So if we had a 50,000 view video that previously would have got 100K views, they're deleting maybe 50K bot views. But then on a video that gets 100K real views, previously getting 200K views, they've deleted 100K bot views. Now that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, like why YouTube would delete more bot views on more popular videos. You would have thought that the bot views would be relatively consistent, or at least fake views across all videos. Like there's just a certain number of bots or scraping things or whatever on our channel. And by deleting them, it just goes, there's just a flat number. So there's that. And also, not that we really want to get into this, but we do know of channels that we suspect do bot views that we sort of use as guides for things. And we aren't seeing bulk bot views removed from those channels. So those two things, I guess, point not as much towards it being bot views, or at least we would expect, those sort of channels to have much more significant impact in views if they're removing them. The second thing is that potentially YouTube are removing views from people who use ad block, which I think is probably more likely based on the statistics that we're seeing, especially with things like desktop being affected more than mobile, harder to block ads on a smartphone as opposed to watching on desktop. We have a very enthusiast audience, so more likely that people watching Harder Unboxed are using ad blockers, which is probably why we and gaming channels seem to have been more affected, or at least that's what we're sort of hearing about more than other channels. I would expect gamers, PC enthusiasts, those sorts of users to be more likely to block ads. And then things like monetized views being sort of flat, normal, views going down. It does point to some sort of change potentially in how they're counting a view from that sense. Not that they've communicated any of this, but that's those are the two theories that I have. The third theory, which I think is sort of less likely, is that YouTube has found some way to specifically target like very engaged viewers and are not showing the videos to unengaged viewers, but things with impressions being relatively flat, click-through rates being relatively flat, leads me to think it's not as much of that, because I would have expected if they'd sort of found a way to target very engaged viewers, like subscribers, maybe people that watch the podcast, that you would have seen overall impressions fall down. They're sort of only showing it to specific people, and then click through for those people would go up. So those are sorts of, yeah, my sorts of theories there. I don't think we'll ever know for sure from YouTube, but I suspect that on channels like ours, that, YouTube has made some sort of change to views, and there may be A/B testing as well. Our channel might be a test
Mm.
channel, other channels may not be, so it's hard to know for certain what's happening there. So,
That makes it tricky. That aside, you can benchmark this stuff. Now, the
mm,
A/B testing part kind of messes with that. But you can, to a channel, upload like 2 unlisted videos and get 20 people with ad blocker to watch one, and then 20 people without ad blocker enabled to watch the other, and then see how the views correlate between those 2 videos. That could be one way to test that theory. But yeah,
mm.
no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and I don't think, I think it's in some ways frustrating that YouTube doesn't communicate changes like that. That is just YouTube though, so it's not like that's a new thing, right? It's like, yeah, YouTube doesn't communicate changes to the algorithm, and I get why they don't, because they don't want people optimizing their content, especially slop content that's bad, specifically for the algorithm. They don't want to say, "Here's what the algorithm does," because then you get people abusing that. So I get
Mhm.
why they don't do that. I think, from our perspective, for the channel's perspective, if people are worried about hardware unboxed or whatever, the fact that it isn't actually impacting our revenue all that much from an AdSense perspective, and also from affiliate links, which is another big part of our revenue, especially on Monitors Unboxed, those things being the same is cause to sort of be like, okay, well, things are going okay in that front. So it's not like our views falling off have meant that, we can't afford to do what we do anymore. Those things, affiliate links are like very surprisingly like 100% flat, like no change whatsoever there really. So that's good. I think the thing is really the thing that you talked about, the impact for, sponsor deals, where some sponsors do like to look at the view count. And if we were saying, oh, we've typically got this amount of views on a video, and so we're going to charge you this amount of money. Now suddenly we're getting a different level of views, then it makes sense we wouldn't be able to charge as much for those integrations anymore. Balin was saying things like, some of the advertisers look for other metrics as opposed to views, how many times you click on the links and make purchases, if that's the way that they're tracking those sorts of links. Others don't though, and are more interested in the sort of impressions on the actual video. So that'll be something for us to work through and sort of figure out. And, we're always thankful to people who are Patreon members and keep that sort of nice stability on the channel going for us. People that watch and are YouTube premium members help out a lot as well. So always appreciative to those people. But yeah, we're just gonna have to figure things out, I guess, on the YouTube, on that sort of front. And, people are much larger channels than us who have people looking into this, and sort of as a community, I think we'll figure it out eventually and just adjust to what's happening. We'll get better. We'll
Mhm.
get good, and yeah, continue from there really.
You'll get good.
But yeah, that was fun coming back from Europe and being like, wow, got to figure out what's going on with the channel. Obviously, when those sorts of things happen, there's a lot of panic, like, oh my God, is it broken, or is this like just affecting us and stuff like that? Because
Mhm.
when we were shadow banned, that only really affected us. And so,
Well, it's probably partly my fault, because about 3 weeks ago, Bale and I were having a discussion. He was happy with how his ad sales and things were going. And I said, yeah, YouTube's been good for, I would say, the last year or two. There's been very little turbulence. It's all smooth sailing. Things are quite predictable. I think we're going to sail through the rest of the year pretty well. Should have a good end of year. All the channels are in good health and it's going well. And
mhm.
like a week after I said that, it all went to shit. But it's quite remarkable that it was such like a false sense of security almost. We all got comfortable because you go back a few years and it was all over the place. Like the views or what was happening with the platform or what worked or what didn't work. It seemed like at one point it was changing almost weekly. But yeah,
Mm.
for the last, I'd say 2 years, it's been pretty consistent. But anyway, there you go. I shouldn't have said anything.
Well, maybe. I mean, yeah, we've obviously heard from people. And I've seen comments in the description on some of these videos talking about this, about how like, oh yeah, I've noticed XY algorithm changes or whatever, or I only get served videos from these creators now, and I'd like the algorithm to change. I think that's probably less of what's happening. I've noticed some changes on my personal account, sort of minor changes, but nothing that would sort of explain these sorts of discrepancies or differences that we're sort of seeing. It's not like one day we were getting served a certain group of creators, and then the next day I log in and it's like, wow, it's all like new channels or something. It seems like YouTube these days just sort of makes very minor changes to that sort of how they serve videos. For better or worse, I think they serve too many of the same videos to me. I'd like a few more, refresh the page, get a few more different things being shown there. That's what I'd like to see improved. But yeah, like you say, it's been consistent for a while as opposed to them going back and forth on what sort of metrics matter for
Mhm.
the channel. They've been very consistent about what things matter. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, we sort of tried to target that, but you can only do what you can only do. But I guess, yeah, business as usual for viewers. This isn't something you should be overly concerned about, aside from if you're interested in YouTube in general. And I guess one positive way of looking about this is that if it is more of the bot side of things and the views are, I guess, becoming more accurate over time, that is better in general for channels to have an accurate view count that actually reflects the habits of viewers. Hopefully, you'd expect that to apply to all channels evenly, so sort of everyone would be in it together. But if it's other things like, not counting views from people who actually are watching the videos but are not seeing ads, that's sort of a more difficult thing to do. But we've never been super against ad block or anything. It sort of is what it is. So yeah, there's that.
Mhm.
Now, what tech topics do you want to talk about? Because YouTube algorithm is people are probably like, I'm going to skip right through that stuff, even though people were watching those videos. But
Yep. Well, yeah, a couple of interesting things have probably cropped up since you've been away. I jumped on the Moore's Law is Dead podcast and had a
mhm,
chat with Tom. I don't know if you saw or heard about this, but we ended up
I
chatting for
saw it.
about
Yep.
3 hours. So we talked about many different things. But prior to that, which we covered in one of our Q&As, or I covered in a Q&A because you were out, jet setting and enjoying life, was the fact that Tom announced that, and he's very confident in this one, that, and I want to get your take on it, that Zen 7 is going to be on AM5.
Yeah, I've seen those sorts of rumors. Um, I don't really know what to expect. I think it's one of those things that's really far out, isn't it? Like we're
Yeah,
talking about.
well, obviously we're not here to confirm nor deny the rumor because we have no information to do so. It's just our personal thoughts and
Mhm.
feelings on that potential rumor. For me, again, not confirming, not denying, not saying it's not going to happen, not saying it is going to happen, but just to be clear, but my expectation was that Zen 7 wouldn't be on AM5. I thought that's kind
Yes.
of where things were heading. I thought Zen 6, based on the information we got, despite the fact that AMD is still yet to confirm this, Zen 6 would be on AM5 and hopefully offer a reasonable performance improvement. Zen 7 was likely to go to like an AM6 socket. So that was my expectations.
Yeah, those would have been my expectations as well, even though, as you sort of said, we're trying to get that confirmed from AMD about the whole, Zen 6 thing. But I think as it gets closer to the launch of that part, it's becoming more clear that it will be, at least based on what we're hearing. So yeah, that would have been my expectation. I think largely because the sort of cadence, the timing between sockets would make sense. Obviously, DDR6 will be more widely available at that point. So, I think Zen 6 is probably coming probably next year, middle to late parts of next year, I would have thought. And so you'll probably be looking at 18 to 24 months after that for a Zen 7. And then you're talking about AM5 being a platform for quite a while. So there's that
So,
angle.
yep, sorry, if you go on.
I guess the other thing that may swing me towards thinking that maybe they would bring Zen 7 to AM5 is that, firstly, because it is so far away, it probably is still in development. So they could, maybe they were targeting a new socket. They probably could at this point modify the plans for that CPU and bring it onto AM5. If we were talking about a CPU that was coming out in like a year or 2 years, I would have said much less likely those designs are probably finalized at this point. But again, I'm just assuming Zen 5 probably isn't. And then, yeah, I guess if AMD's sort of assessing
Or
what
Zen
they're,
7, you mean? Or you
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
or AM5 socket? Sorry, I wasn't sure what you meant by that.
Sorry, yeah. Zen 7
Okay.
will still be in development. They'll be,
Mhm.
they could make changes for that. And then I guess the second thing is that Intel, their main competitor, they're probably looking at what they're doing and maybe thinking, well, maybe we don't need the features that we were going to offer on an AM6 platform to compete with those theoretical future parts. And so it would make more sense for us as a company to continue that socket. We'll leave the advantages of more memory and stuff for a future platform or future CPU or whatever, and we'll just try, continue on with the tried and true platform that they've got, which I think would make sense if they can continue to be the fastest and the best product at that time. Giving people that upgrade path, I think would be good, but you never know.
So on that note, because you and I are both, I think, on the same page, we've been encouraging and saying that AMD really should announce further out ahead of time this platform support stuff, because we believe it's a serious advantage, platform longevity. There's people that still argue otherwise, but their opinions, and to a degree our opinion, is irrelevant because it's been proven. Like, people are flocking to the AMD platforms because of platform longevity. Like, they've seen how AM4 played out. I don't think you'll find too many, let's say, more neutral people that don't prefer one brand over the other or whatever, that wouldn't acknowledge that AM4 was a huge success, largely due to the platform longevity and everything. Of course, the X3D, 5800 X3D really cemented the platform's, let's say, greatness. But even without that, there was still just a huge amount of CPUs that could be used across a massive range of motherboards. So I would have thought, like, Zen 6 is locked in at this point, right? If it's coming on AM5, it's not going to change at this point. Whatever they've locked it into now, it's locked into. So if it is AM5, would it make sense to, make an announcement at like a CES or even before now, once that's finalized, to say, look, our next generation CPUs are still some way out, but they will be on AM5. Like, we're offering up till, at this point, we're guaranteeing till 2027. So next architecture or whatever will be on that platform. I feel like that would encourage many more people to invest in AM5, but then maybe they're already seeing the sales and stuff in the retail sector, and they're like, well, we're dominating sales there. Intel can barely sell a Z890 motherboard to save themselves, so why make that promise, or why get that information out there ahead of time?
Yeah, I guess so. I think they're managing, the different priorities, right? They want to make sure that people are buying the current stuff. They don't want to preemptively sort of say, well, we've got this excellent new product coming in a year, so, don't buy now, buy in a year. They sort of want to avoid that. I think the time to sort of really cement those things, the messaging to people, I guess, would be when you announce the overall platform. Like when AM5 is first released, instead of being a bit wishy-washy with things and sort of saying, we're going to support this for X number of years or whatever, just be very clear and say, what we mean by that is 3 actual CPU architectures, like 3 proper, not rehash CPUs, because AMD loves to do those. 3 proper new architectures will be supported on this platform, or 4, or whatever they're going to do. Just outline that from the start. They don't have to even announce like Zen 6 or Zen 7 specifically. Just new architectures, new future architectures. We are planning to support this many on this platform. I think that would have, established AM5 as a platform that could be worth investing into, especially for those first generation parts where things are a bit more expensive. The motherboards are more expensive. Memory was expensive at the time. It gets people interested in sort of knowing, well, these things are expensive to early adopt, but I'll be able to upgrade to at least 2 architectures in the future, which should give me a nice performance improvement. Whereas what they sort of said was more years and being wishy-washy and not sort of sure what we're going to be getting on that platform. So, yeah, I think it's a huge advantage to sort of announce those things well ahead of time. Where you wouldn't do it is if you're not doing it. So it makes sense for Intel to never say or speak about those sorts of things. But yeah, from the AMD side of things, I think they sort of, if they knew Zen 6 was going to be on the platform from well out, they probably should have said that. And that would have helped sales, because I think a lot of people are still on AM4 as an example and are sort of waiting to hear what next generation stuff is going to be coming on these platforms before they upgrade. And I think they would have convinced some people to move over a bit earlier if the plans for the future are a bit more clear. Like, oh, you can buy a $180, $200 CPU and AM5 now, and then, that'll be the platform you can use for the next 5 years or whatever.
Yeah, because if you had your time again, especially with Zen Plus, you would buy like a B8, a B450 Tomahawk motherboard, for example. You would buy that, get your DDR3 memory and, you know, a Ryzen 5 2600 or something. And you would just sit on that, wait for the 5800X 3D to drop below $300 US, and then snap that up. And how many years are you talking? Like where you've got, that's like what, 7 years at this point that would have done you for. And then you wouldn't even necessarily need to upgrade right now because you're looking at roughly Ryzen 5 7600 levels of performance. So that's pretty good for 7 years, like to still be like a 7600 is still a really good CPU. So that's a very cheap upgrade. So that would be a good way of going about it, I guess is my point. And it seems like AM5 may offer some sort of repeat of that. On the other side of the fence, we've got Intel. So they had LGA 1200 previously, or previously. Actually, sorry, that was LGA 1700, wasn't it? The 12th gen stuff, 13th and 14th gen. So you had LGA 1700, and on that you got Alder Lake, Raptor Lake Refresh. So the 12th gen stuff was pretty good. I thought 12th, I actually really liked the 12th generation. Is that sort of your recollection of things?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it performed well. I believe it was, LJ 1700. So yes, that is correct.
Yeah, I think the article we're looking at here has it wrong. I don't know if we're looking at the same article.
I think so.
Yeah, they've got it wrong.
Yeah, on video cards they say LJ 1200, but it is 1700.
I read what they said, and I'm like, hang on, that's not right. Anyway,
but yeah, I think those parts were competitive, and they did bring a genuine performance improvement over the previous parts because there was a couple of years of refreshes there on the same previous platform. They sort of went around in circles a few times, and then Alder Lake came out, and it performed really well and gave people an improvement, new platform. There was that was the DDR4, DDR5 split generation as well, so there was a lot of options for people. Well,
if we look at I'm just quickly typing this in and looking at now. My Core i5 12600K review, it said, my thumbnail said, buy this, not Ryzen 5. So I think it stands to reason I was probably pretty happy with the 12600K. The 12700K, I said Intel crushes Ryzen 7. So,
yep.
And then my 12100K review, the thumbnail said AMD must cut prices.
Yeah, they had the fastest gaming CPUs pretty comfortably from memory back then.
So it looks like, yeah. And then I called the 12400/12400F the best value gaming CPU, the best value CPU. So 12th gen, I said insane value. Oh, that was for the Core i3. The Core i3 12100F, that got insane value in the thumbnail. So clearly, I was very happy with Intel's 12th generation and recommended that over the existing Ryzen parts, at least when they were launched. So 12th gen was good, but where I'm going with all of this was 13th gen, which was an updated, like Raptor Lake was an iteration on Alder Lake, let's say, and it upgraded a few things, and there was good performance gains to be had. But then at the higher end, the power consumption went stupid. So the lower end chip's pretty good, reasonable upgrade. Things got a bit out of hand at the top end. And then, of course, we got the Raptor Lake refresh, which just went stupid and everything was kind of dumb at that point. And then, years later, they were followed by all the degradation problems and whatever. But if you invested in LJ 1700 with 12th gen, wasn't really much of an upgrade going to 13th gen. You could argue that there were some upgrades that probably made sense, but if you got a 1200K, you would just see that out really. So there was no platform longevity there. And a refresh is useless. Like the 14th gen refresh there was one CPU that got some extra E-cores, the Core i7. Other than that, pretty garbage. So then that brings us to the Core Ultra 200 stuff. So Arrow Lake, guys are pretty well familiar with Arrow Lake at this point in time. That's LGA 1851. Unfortunately, there's no new architecture coming to that socket, which is a pretty bad blow, I would say. I mean, look, the Core Ultra 200 series didn't exactly do much for Intel, but if they could have, it was a good step forward, in my opinion, from the sort of corner they'd painted themselves into with 13th and 14th gen.
Yeah.
So if they could have built upon that, continued heading things in the right direction, then that platform could have turned out to be something worthwhile. But that was never on the cards, and we're getting an Arrow Lake refresh. It's just a straight refresh. There's nothing else to it. There'll be some slight clock speed adjustments or whatnot. Your classic refresh. So there's just, not going to be much there, is there?
Yeah, it's the same parts.
Yeah.
They're going to be releasing the same parts.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Nova Lake is supposedly coming, I don't know whether it's next year or the year after on a new socket.
2027 would be the earliest, I would say.
Yeah, that's what I would have expected. And, I think if that is coming on a new socket, you'd bloody want that to be like the socket actually giving you something different. If they're just changing the socket size and pins, but they're still giving you PCI 5.0, DDR5, you'd sort of be looking at that going like, why? Like I think with the AM6 discussion, it's like, keep the CPUs on the same socket unless you actually need to do a socket change for whatever reason. Like you are changing the memory capabilities or the PCIe, and even on PCIe, you can actually do that in the same socket if you've planned it well enough, because we saw that with AM4. They went from PCI 3.0 to 4.0 on there. So, it is possible to, they really need to make sure that if you're doing a socket, you're keeping that for as long as you possibly can. And then when you're forced to, because of some new technology or whatever, then you start changing. Like, yes, maybe the socket shape is, you want to do a larger CPU or something, so you have to change the socket. If you're doing it after one generation with no real major change, I mean, we're talking about an 1851 pin to a 1954 pin socket. So it's got 100 more pins. Can't be that much larger, right? It's got to be pretty similar to what they've done previously. Like you'd want to be seeing some major technology changes there to justify that, because otherwise they've made a platform for one generation and then immediately gone, okay, we're killing that. So not great.
That's true, but LJ 1851's already been a fail. I think Intel themselves have admitted the Core Ultra 200 series it didn't work out. So they're doing the refresh just to buy a bit of time before they can get to Nova Lake in either late 2026 or probably 2027. So that's just what the situation is. There's no point dwelling on that. Again, not too many people. It's not like people invested in the Core Ultra 200 series expecting multiple upgrades. It was pretty clear straight out of the gate that wasn't going to be the case. So I don't think there's anything to get too up in arms about there. But more, I think, to the point is with Nova Lake, this new LJ 1954 socket, rumor is they're going to be doing at least 4 generations on that, like actual architectural changed generations. So if that's the case, that will be huge for Intel. That'll be some serious competition. Now, they would absolutely have to announce that straight away, that that's going to happen, and not just leave it as, we're going to offer more than 2, because so many people argue that LJ 1700 offered that, but it didn't. It was an architecture with an architectural refinement with a straight refresh. It was 2 generations on the one socket. So you can absolutely call 13th generation a new generation, but 14th gen was just a fake generation. Like it was 13th. I think it was like 13.1, and that's probably being generous.
Yeah, 13.0001. I mean, I think with 1954, to alleviate that problem, they should probably say generations and then number of years as well. So sort of saying this is going to be 4 generations, 4 new architectures across 7 years or whatever they're going to come up with for that. Just sort of to alleviate this thing, because everyone knows Intel does CPU refresh generations, and those happen yearly, effectively. Like if there's an off year for an architecture, a refresh gets inserted, which is what's happening with Arrow Lake refresh. So by sort of saying from the get-go, 4 generations over 7 years, that will get people very excited and very interested. And I think what it really opens up for Intel is it allows them to not be the fastest processor, which was what AMD managed to benefit from, was having these value options where people could go and spend $120, $150 on a CPU, and it's not the fastest, but it could be really cheap and good value. And then you're investing into this platform where later on, as things improve, maybe there'll be a faster and more performant thing that you could slot in without having to buy a new motherboard. That was the success of AM4. They weren't the
Absolutely.
fastest.
Yep.
And so Intel's problem right now is that they're not the fastest CPUs, but then there's no reason to buy budget parts because the platform is dead immediately. So you're saving money, but you're also kind of not saving money because the next time you want to buy anything, you have to throw all that stuff away and buy again, new motherboard, maybe new memory, depending on what they do there, but minimum motherboard and the CPU. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes a lot of sense that they can come out there, maybe not have the best performing parts, maybe they don't win in gaming performance, whatever, but at least they'll be able to compete on value and start building this ecosystem and platform up for people. So I think that'll be really good if that rumor turns out to be accurate.
Yeah, like initial rise, and it just has to show some potential with some longevity because we're talking about probably around 2027. That's when Zen 6 will be on the scene. So really, depending on how that turns out, you know, you'll have a better idea of how this will work. But the assumption there would be, okay, we got Zen 6, rumors are saying Zen 7, AMD may not have confirmed that at that point in time. So you're sitting there, let's say you've got an old PC, you need a whole new platform upgrade. And you're looking at, the new Core Ultra 400 series or Zen 6. And with Zen 6, you may have to work under the assumption that there could be another generation coming for this investment that you're about to make. Not sure what that'll offer. But with the Core Ultra 400 series, you're probably going to get the 500 series, the 600 series, and the 700 series, if Intel does indeed announce an additional 3 generations for the 4-generation support. And at that point, motherboard prices have only continued to increase. If you're looking at spending, a couple $100 on your motherboard, your memory, and let's say the Core Ultra 400 series is about as good as Zen 6, within 10% for gaming, it starts to shift. You'll actually see that role reversal where the Core Ultra 400 series becomes more like what probably Zen Plus was, possibly better because the performance may be more compelling than Zen Plus was. So Intel does have a chance here. Of course, this is huge assumptions. Like we're working under the assumption that Intel's actually going to change strategy for the first time ever, which they've been, reluctant to do, let's say, to this point in time. They need to do it because it's really the only way for them to survive in terms of retail sales, because their retail sales are horrific. Look, they might be still clinging onto like laptop stuff and OEM, but that stuff erodes over time as well. And it's eroding as we speak. So they can't continue this strategy just going, well, we're dominant in laptops, we're dominant in system integrator pre-built stuff. So
yeah,
we'll be fine.
Laptops use integrated motherboards too, so they can do whatever they want there. It's like making an open platform that lasts for multiple generations has no impact on their laptops whatsoever. So they can continue to do that on laptops. Yeah, it'll affect OEMs, but I think, is it really the case that having CPU upgrades available for AMD OEM systems, does that hurt AMD OEM sales? I wouldn't have thought that someone going and buying a pre-built system is overly likely to upgrade the CPU themselves. I mean, there's people that will do that who are sort of teetering on that enthusiast PC builder versus just want the ease of having someone build the PC for them and sort of keep up with things. But, most of those OEM sales go to like offices.
Yeah, but that's good for AMD anyway. It's AMD's relationships and contracts with these companies like Dell, who are like, no, we want you to lock this crap down so they don't have that option. Because AMD is still making the sale. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, I think that would be a good strategy for Intel to go with is, changing up what they've been doing. I mean, really, all cards should be on the table at Intel. Like, if they're looking at what they've been doing, there shouldn't be anything that's off limits. Like, they should be looking to change everything, basically.
So I sort of had this conversation with Tom, but I'll ask you, what are your thoughts and feelings on platform longevity? Like, how important do you think it is?
Yeah, I think,
it obviously depends on where you are in the product cycle and stuff like that. But I mean, just in general, like having multiple generations, as in 4.
I think it's probably the second most important feature outside of the CPU performance itself and obviously the value equation, like where it's priced and all of that.
Mhm.
I'm thinking about like what other things do you get from a CPU, like the other features, for example, like you buy a motherboard, right, and you get a certain number of PCIe lanes out of the CPU or the memory support or whatever, and all of those things pale in comparison to the importance of actually being able to upgrade the platform over time. So, like, would I go with a closed platform that offers slightly more PCIe lanes over an open platform with fewer PCIe lanes? Absolutely not. Like, there's no way I'm making that choice. I guess there might be some power users, and maybe it's not as important for people who buy the flagship stuff because, like we always talk about with 5090s, you have a lot of money to spend, you spend a lot on the hobby. It's probably not that restrictive to have to buy a new motherboard every time. But I think
Mhm.
for the mainstream buyer, if
Yeah,
I'm
that's
thinking
right.
about the
Mhm.
normal buyer who doesn't have tons to spend on their PC, the sort of people that are very upset with GPU pricing, which is most of
Or
our audience.
not even like they still might be 9800X 3D owners. They just don't want to have to rehaul their entire PC 2
It's
years down the
annoying.
track.
Yeah, it's
Sucks. Like,
annoying. It means that you're more likely to do CPU upgrades. I think
mhm,
if the platform is not upgradable, then instead of spending money to get the new motherboard, you're more likely to not do that and just keep
mhm,
what you've currently got for longer. And so by having this sort of open platform upgrade support, it allows people to sort of go, okay, do I really need a CPU upgrade? I'm sort of in the maybe category, but I've already got the motherboard and the CPU is not that expensive and I could do with a bit more performance, so I'll upgrade. Whereas if you had to upgrade, the whole motherboard, you have to pull your PC apart to do it, all that, you'd be like, nah, I'll just stick with what I've got and I'll accept that my performance is going to be slowly getting worse in games over time.
mhm.
So for me, I think it's, yeah, obviously extremely important. And I kind of don't, as you sort of said, I don't really get the other angle of it being not that important. Like I don't
It's
see how it's not important.
it's one of those cope arguments where, "Oh, I don't have it, so it doesn't matter," or "I never did it. I never upgraded." It completely, again, defeats the purpose, or it's against the point. So it is anti-consumer to see what we did on LJ 1851. It's consumer friendly to offer the ability to upgrade, the flexibility, whether or not you want to do it, whether or not you take part in that process. Pretty much irrelevant. It's that you could do it if you wanted to, and it's been proven in the examples like AM4. It was absolutely something you should do, and a lot of people did do. So I don't
Hmm.
know where, like, you don't really have a leg to stand on with that. It's just such a disingenuous thing to say, is that platform longevity doesn't matter. It's, whatever, insert silly argument. Arguing for not having that feature, I want to say it's idiotic. Is that too harsh? It's just,
Yeah, no,
it,
it's pretty idiotic. I mean, like the desktop platform is an upgradable platform. That's apart from having high levels of performance, that is the other main reason to have a desktop PC
mhm.
is that it's a modular platform. It's
Well,
upgradable.
on my gaming PC up above my desk, I got my streaming PC and my gaming PC. Both of them have 12900KS CPUs in them, because they were provided for the systems I built. I'm probably going to replace them when Zen 6 comes out, because already I'm getting some stuttering issues and annoying problems with the 1200KS, and it's starting to crash more and more often, which is annoying as well. So I definitely want to replace it as soon as I can, but it would be great. I think they're like 800 Australian dollar Asus motherboards in both systems, and one's got 64 gigabytes of DDR4, the other one's got 32. Of course, I can carry that memory over to the newer Intel platforms if I wanted to, but it would be amazing if I could slot like a 9800X 3D type CPU into at least the gaming PC to get, double my frame rates in competitive shooters. But at the moment, I'm just making do with it. It's kind of annoying.
Hmm.
Um,
I think the
but yeah, I
only
can't. I've got no upgrade for that. That really, what am I going to put, a 13th or 14th gen CPU in there?
yeah, that doesn't make sense. I
Mhm.
think the only argument for not having, platform longevity or upgradability is if there's some benefit from that. Like I think of, phones, for example, or laptops or whatever, having something that's upgradable, you have to add space components, that sort of thing. into the system, which may compromise it in other ways. I remember when phones used to have replaceable batteries. Great feature, awesome. These days, with the thinness of phones and the components and things like that, you do gain a small amount of capacity for, size, space you can put the battery in by not making it user upgradable, because you can remove the plastic shrouds and stuff that would mean that you can make it upgradable. So I can sort of understand that. I'm still not hugely in favor of that, but you can sort of think of the engineering reason why they did that. On a desktop PC, it's like space is not a concern whatsoever. Like no one cares if the socket is there as opposed to like an embedded CPU. Literally no one cares. They would rather have the upgradability. They'd rather have the flexibility to do what they want and not have to throw out these expensive investments. So yeah, I'm always in favor of it for that sort of platform. It just makes sense. So I don't understand the other angle at all. Makes no sense.
Yeah, well, not to drag this out, but while you were away, someone tweeted at me and said, there's a Core i5 14600K bundle you can buy at the moment that comes with 2 games. And, I think our opinion generally is like, if you want to get that, that's fine. But we have not promoted products in the past due to the game bundles because they're often only available in certain regions. You have to work under the assumption that you actually want the game. I guess you could try and sell the key or whatever, but remember when there was those Radeon bundles and everyone wanted to get, we were getting hammered, you've got to recommend this Radeon deal because of the bundle and whatever. And I think we both agreed that that's not necessarily a reason to buy a product over another product if the other product is faster or better featured or whatnot. But
yeah,
anyway, there was a 14600K, you get Battlefield 6, and I think it was maybe Assassin's Creed Shadows. I don't recall. 2 of those games, which is pretty good. The CPU was quite heavily discounted. Basically, the games aside, you could get a 14600K motherboard and memory for roughly the same price as a Ryzen 5 7600 with motherboard and memory. Now, for gaming, they're basically the same sort of performance. The Ryzen processor uses like 30 to 40% less power, but the end result is similar, if not the same gaming performance, especially out of the box using decent memory for both systems. And I was of the opinion that, and again, I wasn't really factoring in the games because I don't want to play Battlefield 6 or Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I guess I could sell them to recoup some of the money if that's a thing. Like, I guess you can sell those keys. I don't really know. I've not looked into it. I don't know the legitimacy of that.
I don't know whether it's like you have to enter your account details into a form or something when you buy it. Sometimes they don't give you the keys directly.
That's what I would have thought as well. But anyway.
But I think with the game bundle thing, it's like there's always that value people put on the games. They're like, well, you're getting a $60 game and a $40 game or whatever, therefore $100 off effectively. But then if you don't want to play those games, the value of that is zero.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, again, maybe you'll be able to sell it. Maybe you'll be able to recoup $50. Whatever it is, it may not be $100 of value. It's only for people that were specifically going to buy both of those games at those prices that the value, the discount, I guess, comes into play.
Yeah, where it becomes a consideration. But my thinking there is you're buying a 14600K, having to buy, it's Intel's previous generation platform. So it's quite a big investment. Like, you're investing in the motherboard and memory, the motherboard and CPU. You're buying the memory, but DDR5, you would be able to use that on the platforms and whatnot. So that's probably less of an issue. But CPU, motherboard, I'm just like, well, I personally, if you gave me the option of those two, I would go AM5 without hesitation because I'd be getting the same performance right now. And we're talking about gaming here, not necessarily productivity. That sort of changes the discussion a bit, possibly not entirely. But anyway, you get similar gaming performance right now, and then you have the ability to buy one of the currently discounted 7800X 3Ds. I mean, you wouldn't upgrade straight away, obviously, but it's an example of what already exists. The 7800X 3Ds have got down to $340 US as of late because, and that's another funny thing, but we can talk about that maybe in a second. The 9800X 3D exists. What is the likelihood of a 9800X 3D falling below $400 US in the next year or two.
Yeah, pretty high, you would think.
Pretty high, you would think. So how cheap are you going to be able to replace that 7600 with in 2 years now with a 9800X 3D or a similar performing part?
Yeah, I think those bundles, they basically have to make the motherboard free compared to the AMD part. So
Which
that
if you include if you include the games, then they do, but for reasons that we've said, we don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Like if the option was AMD, you have to buy a motherboard, Intel, effectively the motherboard is free. That means that you can upgrade in the future and buy a new motherboard. Obviously, it's inconvenient, but to do the actual swap, but you will be able to effectively just buy one motherboard with either of those situations. Either you buy the AM5 motherboard up front with the CPU, or you get the free motherboard with Intel, then you buy the new motherboard later when you want to upgrade.
Yeah, with the AM5 thing, I would be inclined to actually invest more money overall to get a better motherboard, knowing that will be putting it, and you are spending more money. But if I was going the 14600K way, I'd be getting the most dirt cheap, I wouldn't be buying an Apex so I can do memory tuning, for example. I would be getting the absolute most dirt cheap motherboard. And by the way, they were talking about pairing it with DDR4 as well, which actually makes it slower than a 7600. So anyway, it was just it became like a huge point of contention. Like it was made to seem that it was completely outrageous that I was saying I would still invest in AM5 for the already known platform longevity, and we don't even know what Zen 6 is bringing to the table. So if you get 20% better performance there or whatever it may end up being, and one of the high-end parts there ends up after a year or two getting discounted, which historically has happened every single time, then the upgrade could be huge. Whereas with the 14600K, like you say, you have to get rid of the motherboard, potentially the memory.
Yeah, it's kind of like the VRAM thing. Like, we recommend buying a 9060 XT 16 gigabyte over the 8 gig or any of the 8 gigabyte models, even though it's more expensive for entry-level buyers, because it will last you longer. And yeah, not everyone is able to just spend $350 or $370 instead of $300. Like it is a sizable increase in the price of the product, but it just makes a lot more sense for gamers to do that and not have to worry about upgrading because of VRAM in the near future. So it does make sense at times to spend more money on products from an investment angle. We don't mean investment as in you're going to get a return of money later, but like just buying the better components.
You will.
Well, yeah, you actually will in that sense, but buying better products so that they last you longer or give you more flexibility or whatever, those are advantages. You don't want to be upgrading often for reasons like your product is superseded.
People then throw that back in your face and go, but you so don't future-proof. And it's like, that's a different argument. That's in hope of something opposed to something that's very well proven.
Yes. Yeah.
It's two very different things. You're confusing. Yeah. Leading into another thing that I did. So I noticed when I was doing my Battlefield 6 testing that a lot of the more modern 6-core CPUs ran really well, ran the game, respectively. Like the 9600X, for example, delivered virtually the same performance as the 9700X, which I was kind of expecting to see that based on what I knew, but at the same time with the game being, first of all, scaling across many cores and threads while utilizing them to quite a heavy degree or substantial degree, that there may have been a bit more separation there between the 6 and 8 cores. It was like less than 10%, 5% in a lot of instances. And this is, conquest matches running through the match, which Balin helped me do at the exact same time. So extremely accurate apples to apples data. And so the 9600X and 9700X were delivering, basically the same performance. And so I went back a generation, I went back 2 generations technically, tried some, Zen 3 parts, found pretty much the same thing. And it wasn't until I went back to Zen Plus that I started to see, I think it was like a 20-ish% performance margin between the 6 and 8 core models. Not quite the 30-something% difference, 33% difference you see in core count. But So I found that interesting. And basically, I tiled the video in a way that, you don't necessarily need more than 6 cores, which, we've talked about. There's a couple of things here like cores ain't cores. So because you've got an 8-core, a 12-core, a 16-core processor, doesn't mean it's going to be faster than a 6-core processor. It depends on the architecture of the cores, how fast the individual cores are, all that sort of stuff. So kind of, I would say common sense stuff, but in the gaming sphere, it's kind of lost. And we see this, like people were saying, well, Borderlands 4, which will be launching at roughly the same time as this podcast, the minimum specifications list an 8-core CPU, so therefore the game requires 8 cores. But it's like a really old 8-core CPU, so they're just using a CPU, and people are
So the usual stuff, right?
Yep. Yeah, it gets a bit convoluted. But a few people on Reddit aggressively pointed out, and I guess they tried to make out that we were contradicting ourselves, or just were all over the place to try and discredit us, that while we say we recommend 16 gigabytes of VRAM opposed to the 8 gigabyte models because better, we're happy to recommend 6-core processors that are clearly, inferior to 8-core processors, for example. And they were sort of likening them to be the same sort of thing, like, neither a 6 cores, not because I kind of called them out on it on Reddit, and they had a go at me for like my comprehension skills, saying, well, you're saying 8 gigabytes of VRAM isn't ideal, and we're merely pointing out that 6 cores isn't ideal, which the point of the video was that's not necessarily the case at all. Like, you can buy a 9600X, and in all games, or at least the majority of games, get 9700X like performance, and you only need to go to Computer Base, Tech Power Up, Gamers Nexus, list any one of your other 100 favorite tech media outlets, go look at their gaming benchmarks, and you'll see that a part like the 9600X is right there alongside the 9700X in terms of performance. Even in games like Space Marine 2, for example. Now, where they differ is in stuff like shader compilation, performance.
Right.
There could be maybe like turn-based games or city builders, something like that, where there's a bit more of a difference. But for the majority of games, and now you might, and don't confuse this with my opinion on I'm okay with Intel or AMD releasing X amount of cores, like core stagnation, which is also a different thing. I would love it if for $200 you were getting a 12-core processor. But that's not the world we live in. So the perspective I was coming at this from was, the reality is, if you want to buy a new CPU and you have around $200 to spend, it's likely going to land you 6 big cores or 6 cores. It's going to get you a 6-core processor. And if you want an 8-core processor, it's the 9700X is $330. So right now, if you jump over to Newegg or anywhere in the US, the 9600X is $205 US. The 9700X is $330 US. That is a 61% premium for 33% more cores. Now, if you're someone sitting there scratching your head going, oh, do I buy the 9700X? It's got 8 cores. I've heard that's better for gaming, but it's so much more expensive than the 9600X, which has 6 cores. And I've just shown that you can play the latest and greatest games and see next to no difference. So there's no point spending 61% more if you can't afford to do so. That isn't to say, like, I'm not saying don't buy 8-core CPUs or 8-core CPUs are no good. I'm just saying right now, we have very little evidence that you're going to get a 60% improvement in terms of value of your investment. And we went all the way back to Zen Plus and only found a 20% improvement. And the Ryzen 5 2600 still played Battlefield 6 without any frame time issues. The frame rate wasn't particularly impressive. It was around just shy of 60 FPS, I think. But it worked. And that's a very old CPU. So my point, it was more to reassure people without much money that realistically spending an additional 60% on your CPU is not a wise investment. You'd be better off saving that money and buying a new AM5 processor in a few years to come that will be much faster than either of these options.
Yeah, I guess that's where they're coming from with I guess that's where they're coming from with the 8 versus 16 gig angle, isn't it? It's like at some point, 8 gigabytes became not sufficient.
Well,
So I guess they're equating and saying at some point, because the 8-core CPUs from years ago have overall more CPU performance than the 6-core models, at some point, the 8-core models will perform better than the 6-core models. But the
yeah.
crucial difference there is how far back do you have to go to
Well, we've
find
not
that?
really seen that. We've not really seen it. And again, you would be better off because it's a large sum of money. We're talking about like, $130 US. It's more than half the price of the 9600X. So in that sense, you're better off pocketing that money and then buying a Zen 6, or if Zen 7 happens to end up on AM5, buy the equivalent entry-level CPU then, because it'll be much faster than either of those options right now. So there's a bit of nuance to this, like it has to make sense. Whereas with the 16 gigabyte option, you're talking about $300 to $350. I mean, I think the 16 gig cards are probably still like $370, but it's around a 20% premium. It's not 60%.
So and it gives you an immediate difference.
Yeah, we're talking about half, and as far as the physical volume of money, it's like half. It's like $50 to $70.
Yeah, and you realize that immediately and for years to come. Whereas with the 8 versus 16, you're waiting for that future to happen. And I mean, but if there was evidence, right, like right now in games that there was that 8 cores gave you more than 6 cores, then we'd be saying, it would be like the VRAM thing. We'd be saying 6 cores is kind of on the edge for games these days. The overall performance of a 6-core CPU is not enough for today's games. Therefore, you might want the extra performance of 8 cores, but there isn't that evidence.
Well, so, I would love to actually see some evidence where a Ryzen 5 3600 is a stuttery, unusable mess, or very suboptimal, but a 3700X works great. Find me that evidence.
Well, it's like CPU performance is just so different to VRAM as well, where
it's different.
The 8-core model might be 25% faster overall, which means that the most likely thing that'll happen is the games will run 25 or 20% slower, whatever it is, on the 6-core model later on at some point.
That's right. That's right.
Whereas with VRAM, it's like you exceed 8 gigabytes by half a gigabyte and performance can be cut in half, or alternatively, you don't see the same image quality or whatever. It's like, it's not like a gradual reduction where you get slower and slower over time. It's instantly the experience sucks. So
two very different things. Well, I've met my quota. We got to talk about VRAM for a few minutes. So I was actually going to talk about how Jared came over. We did some VRAM testing, but we can skip over that now because the VRAM quota has been met. So thanks for helping me on that one, Tim.
Nice. Anything else you want to talk about? There's a few other rumors and things.
I guess we could wrap it up talking about Arc B770 incoming. So this one, the Arc B770 incoming thing, that was pretty hot around Computex. If you recall, a lot of people were expecting that to be announced at Computex, and I think Intel's social manager, whatever you want to call those people who man those accounts, really flamed a few. What is it?
Stoked the flames a little bit there,
didn't they? Stoked the flames on that one. So that didn't happen. We didn't expect it to at all. I think we said on the podcast that was not going to happen. Arc B770. So the rumor is suggesting that it's going to have 60% more cores. It's going to have 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, 256-bit wide bus, PCIe 5.0 times 16, which is kind of irrelevant, but fine. So substantial performance upgrade over the Arc B580, you would think. At least twice the performance, you would think, depending on scaling and whatnot. I'm of the opinion that product's not going to happen, despite the fact that there seems to be pretty strong evidence that it is going to happen. So therefore, I'd immediately be wrong. I just don't know how. I don't think the Arc overhead issue that we're seeing with the Battle Mage architecture can be solved via drivers. And we know Intel's been working on that for a long time because they've told us directly they're working on that since it was basically since the B580 came out. And I don't think they've made any headway. A few people have done some recent testing and still shown that the B580 in certain scenarios has quite substantial CPU overhead. So if you were to double the performance of the B580, that is going to cripple a lot of, more entry level mainstream type CPUs in quite a few games, I would think. Of course, it's an educated guess based on the information we have. But yeah, I would expect a B770 to be quite a demanding product on the CPU. So I know I'm intrigued by that one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, and every time it's come up, it's been like, this doesn't really make sense from that perspective. It may not make sense from the economics of making the part either, in terms of like die size, memory, how much they could actually price it at. Um, Maybe it doesn't work from that sense either. I think we know that Intel has been working on this larger die, so it's not crazy to suggest that there is a GPU die that they have worked on that's larger than the die in the B580. So there was test GPU die things and all sorts of, you know how people dive into those sorts of things and they try and figure out what companies are testing. That happened many, many months ago, and that sort of, people sort of figured out it was happening. The question is, just because you're testing something doesn't mean that it's a viable product and that you're going to bring it to market. And I think this product is probably not viable. The only reason I could see them doing it is if they already manufactured quite a few of these dies. So maybe at one point they were expecting this to be viable. They produced them, then they tested them and they realized, oh, hang on, we're not getting the performance that we're expecting out of these or whatever. And so it doesn't become as viable now, but they've still got all these GPU dies, in which case then I guess maybe they could try and recoup some of their losses by selling them at a loss or whatever, but not as much of a loss as throwing out the GPU dies. I'm not sure. That's the only angle I can see where it would make sense to release it. But that would only ever be like a limited edition sort of run type product, not a long-term release. Is there interest as well in like a B770 class of product? The B580 is doing, or was doing well. It is actually back at $250 now, so credit to them, but it was interesting at the time because of the lack of options in that price range that had more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM and were delivering some sort of performance improvement. That's why people are interested in the B580. The rumors for the B770, 16 gig GPU, I mean, is it like it'd be more expensive than a B580? Is anyone really like going to go wild for, even if this was like $350? Like there's already supposedly the 9060 XT 16 gig that should be that price. So they're not going to be able to use the VRAM angle. I don't know. It just doesn't sound like a product that would be overly compelling unless for whatever reason the die was very surprisingly faster than it actually would end up being. So
yeah, well, just spitballing some numbers. If we look at my 9060 XT 16 gigabyte data, the Arc B580, it's comparable to an RTX 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte and Radeon RX 6700 XT, like 53 FPS.
Yep.
If we increase the performance by 32%, so this is on an 18 game average, so if on average it was a 32% performance improvement, that places it on par with a 9060 XT and 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte. So if the performance is 50% better, that puts it more with like an RTX 4070 type performance. So,
and that's assuming that overhead, that's assuming like good scaling.
That's ignoring the overhead angle, of course. So it's conceivable it could be a little bit faster than a 9060 XT and a 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte. Providing, the no overhead issue. So what's a 9060 XT? They're probably $370-ish.
Yeah, they're $370. We have a pricing video going up on
that's right.
Hardware Unbox soon. So $370, pretty much worldwide, roughly that price.
So same VRAM, realistically $300. It would be $50 more than a B580. Are they going to
no.
Can't happen, can it?
I mean, this is not discounting the fact that they may make this product. It's just that it may not make any sense.
Well, yeah, even if it was 10% faster than these Radeon and GeForce GPUs, yeah, you're talking, and we're kind of ignoring, but kind of factoring in the overhead problem into that. I guess we're factoring it in. So let's just say the overhead problem is similar to what we're seeing on B580, like it's not noticeably worse. Then yeah, $300 is really the cap there. Like they could try 350, but I don't really see that working. If it's 10% faster and it's the same MSRP as the 9060 XT, it's gonna be tough. It's a pretty tough one to slot into now. So given all of those obvious factors with the overhead issue, I don't see them releasing this product in 2 months' time, which is what they're rumored to be doing. But look, they very well could. I'm not saying they won't. I'm just saying I don't expect them to, given those problems, but maybe they have to regardless. So they just got to send it, and that's just part of the process. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not sure. Maybe they're, wanting to get more cards out for whatever reason. There's sort of, as I said, the die angle. Maybe they already made them. I'm not sure. I think if I was Intel and I had allocation of wafers, and I was thinking, what am I doing with these? What am I making? I'm making more B580s at $250, because even at $250, there is some reason to buy the product. It does offer a unique thing that other products in that price range don't offer, which is the VRAM. So they have an angle there with that product. I would just make more B580s, make them available for $250, continue that. Maybe can they get it a bit cheaper? I don't know. Whatever the case is, continue on that path. Probably don't do the B770, and then just work on your next generation architecture and fix up some of these problems, aim for higher performance targets and so on.
Yep.
Because, the B580 isn't the worst product. So, there's stuff to build on there. We'll touch on briefly before taking a break, the RTX 50 Super launch, which there's been rumors talking about that being unlikely before 2026. I don't quite know why there was these rumors that it was coming this year. I don't think we'd really heard anything concrete, really anything at all that was suggesting that it was coming this year, outside of just like, the usual random rumors on the internet. I think I've always thought that this is probably more likely a 2026 launch.
I thought they might squeeze it in late. Apparently it's been delayed. So delayed is what we're hearing now. So
yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know whether it was ever delayed or whether it was just always targeting.
Well, we're never going to know, are we?
Yeah.
I thought it would make sense to release it in late 2025. That would sort of make the most sense with timing for possibly the next generation, but whatever. Anyway, the updated rumor is saying that it's going to be next year.
Yeah.
So,
I think the position that NVIDIA's in at the moment, they don't really... Like, I know that they do need it from the sense that it would be nice to fix some of the VRAM issues with parts, but it's not like they're uncompetitive at the moment in the like the rumors are suggesting it's a 5070 Super, 5070 Ti Super, and 5080 Super. Now the 5080 AMD doesn't really compete with that part really, so they're releasing a new version of that really just for GeForce customers. The 5070 Ti is still quite competitive with the 9070 XT, especially now that it's $750. So do they really need a super version at the moment to sort of correct an imbalance there? Not really. And then the 5070 is one of NVIDIA's most competitive parts at the moment. So the super model would be better because they would have 18 instead of 12 gigabytes of memory. But the 5070 is, in a lot of cases, a reasonable purchase right now. So it's not like they're desperate to, if the 9070 XT was $600, they might be in a bit of trouble with the 5070, but it's not. So there's no real urgency for them at the moment. I think if AMD was able to overnight make the 9070 XT $600, they would be in a bit more of a problem with some of these parts. And I think maybe then you'd start pushing out something like a super refresh. But as things stand right now, they can pretty much just sit back and enjoy the sales in those areas. It's more, what they needed to do was make like a 5050 Super and a 5060 Super, so that those are more competitive down the low end, where Radeon is the most competitive. So anyway, that's been a long talk about tech and stuff. We haven't done a podcast for like a month, so I guess that makes sense. Anyway, let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about our boring or maybe interesting lives. Hello, everyone. Tim here from the day after we recorded this podcast episode with just a brief intermission before we get into the rest of the boring life stuff. This is just an announcement for people who are in Australia and who are Patreon members. I have currently run out of space to store monitors. Obviously, we test a lot of monitors over at Monitors Unboxed. We have to put them somewhere once we're done reviewing them. I've run out of space, so I need to get rid of some of them. So if you're in Australia and you're a Patreon member, we often get rid of monitors to people who are Patreon members. So you can check the post that's up there on the Patreon page at the moment to look through all the details based on that. But this is just a reminder for people who are Patreon members but don't necessarily check all of the posts we put up there, that this might be a good opportunity to get one of the monitors from us. So yeah, just that little PSA for people. That's all really. Hopefully we can free up some space, get back to the normal process of making monitor reviews and continue on throughout the rest of the year. So thanks to the people that help me out with this every year or so. It always happens around this time. But yeah, let's get into the rest of the podcast. All right, Steve, we're back. Now, I guess, should I talk about the holiday or did you want to talk about anything?
I've got heaps of things to talk about, but they're not time sensitive and they're stories I can tell. They're stories I can tell at any point, really. So I've made notes so I don't forget them. So I feel like, I'll tell them maybe next time if you haven't got much, but I feel like you've probably got a lot to talk about. So, and I'm interested to hear, so maybe I'll just sit back like everyone else and listen to your boring life.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I don't know how much I really want to talk too much about this because you're hearing about other people's holidays, not always the most exciting topic. But yeah, so I went to Europe for 3 weeks. I think some people in the Discord sort of knew that I was just going to Europe. They didn't really know where I was going or anything like that. And a few people were sort of making fun of sort of the usual thing that people do, which is they go to Europe and they sort of, there's only 4 countries they're ever interested in: the UK, Italy, France, and Spain. And I went to 0 of those countries because I've already been to all of them previously for work or travel. My partner's been to a couple of them as well. So we decided not happening, not going to those countries. So I went to the other countries in Europe, some of them, which was quite
There's other ones?
It turns out there are other ones.
Go
and
on.
They're worth visiting. So all the countries I went to were very interesting and very enjoyable to visit. So there's no country I was sort of like, yeah, wouldn't go back there. So I flew into Germany and I flew into Munich. So that's where the holiday started, down in the Bavarian region of Germany. Beautiful part of the world. So Munich's a great, lovely city. Best bit of the traveling happened in there. So that will please the Germans and the Bavarians. But yeah, like we went down and had a look at some of the castles and palaces and stuff in the Alp region. Yeah, just great, beautiful, beautiful place. Munich was a fun place to be. Visited Austria as well. So I have Austrian heritage. My family on my dad's side is from Austria. So that was the first time that I'd ever been there. And so I thought, it'd be nice to sort of visit the homeland, I guess, or at least partly a homeland for me. So we went to Salzburg and Vienna, both, again, beautiful cities, lovely castle in Salzburg in particular. It was very interesting up on the hill there. And then obviously Vienna is another really interesting and beautiful city with lots of stuff to go around and visit, and nice food and stuff like that. I know, Germanic food sometimes gets a bit of a hard knock compared to Italian and French food that a lot of people tend to prefer, but I don't mind some of the stuff that they've got there. So yeah, Austria, great place to visit, and obviously very beautiful scenery and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I visited Hungary. We went to Budapest. We actually were there on like Budapest's or Hungary's national holiday. So sort of like Australia Day, but Hungary Day or something. So there was this like big Hungarian festival in the city centre up in there, sort of, I think they've got like a castle up on the hill or whatever it's called up there. Just a huge festival of like Hungarian, history and stuff like that. Lots of people out in the streets and stuff. So that was pretty cool. We had no idea when we were going there that it was like a holiday or something. We just happened to rock up there. And then we're like, oh, what's going on? Like, there's a lot of people out in the streets and there's like a festival. And then, it turns out, yeah, it was the Hungarian national holiday. So
that's cool.
Yeah, Hungarian food, goulash and stuff like that was fantastic that we had there. And yeah, just seeing Hungarian culture. The language is really weird. So it just sounds weird. Like, sorry to Hungarian people. German is sort of like, you can sort of understand what's going on being an English speaker. Like, some of the words are shared origins. Hungarian is just like, nothing I've ever heard before. So yeah, interesting there. We traveled up to Czechia, so we went to Prague. It's probably the best city that we went to overall. Just like the vibes of the city was really cool. On the whatever the river is there, just again like beautiful city, great stuff to visit. The castle up there was really interesting. You can get nice views and just all the old towns and stuff. And I know, I guess for Europeans, right, who are listening to this sort of me talk about visiting castles and palaces and stuff and old-timey buildings and having fun doing that, they're probably like, yeah, whatever. Like my town that I live in has, a building from 700 years ago, big deal. Like everywhere's got castles and old buildings. But Australia, if you're not familiar, Europeans only settled Australia in the late 1700s. So prior to that, it was the nomadic, indigenous people before that. So that's those, civilization back then, there wasn't really a necessity to build massive old cities or big structures and castles and stuff like that. Like that's not what indigenous Australians did. They moved around much more than Europeans did. And so while we do obviously have history from that period, we do not have large, huge castles and histories of, that sort of settlement. So when you go to a place like Europe that has a castle from 1,000 years ago, that's just not something that's in Australia at all. Like there's nowhere we can go to really see things like that. So it's very interesting to go to European cities and learn about the history of that time period, like medieval history, the wars that were fought in that area. And because it's kind of like, I'm European, I have European heritage, it's kind of our culture, I guess, in a way. All that stuff is, super interesting because European history at least begins from sort of the 1800s onwards. That's just very different. So, yeah, all that stuff is genuinely very interesting for me, very interesting for my partner as well. We love going around and doing that sort of thing. We did mix it up a bit with some more outdoorsy scenery by flying to Iceland, which is a place I've always wanted to visit, or at least visit for a very long time. My partner was super keen on going there as well. And Iceland was amazing. I would highly recommend people go to Iceland to see the things that they've got there, the scenery, the beauty of a volcanic island nation like that. Iceland is extremely expensive, so that's probably going to be a limiting factor for people. Just like accommodation and food and stuff is much more expensive than Czechia, for example, which is probably a moderate to cheaper sort of European country. But we rented a car, we drove around. I drove probably about 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers across a couple of days, just seeing things that it's really hard to describe. It's like an alien land there. You sort of drive north and you can see, like mountains that are covered with grass and beautiful waterfalls. But then you drive along the south and it's like volcanic rock and sort of weird mossy, deposits of lava that's cooled over years. And you can go into lava caves where there's like deposits that have sort of formed into these sort of tubes that you can go through. That was really cool. We saw an enormous waterfall, Gullfoss waterfall, amazing, huge waterfall. A lot of the other stuff I can't pronounce. So just Icelandic language, unfortunately, makes it very difficult. I think we went as far as Svartavoss waterfall, which is in the sort of southeastern part out of Reykjavik. It was about a 4-hour drive there. Just unbelievable seeing stuff like that, glaciers, everything. So hot springs you can go to there as well. We went to obviously Blue Lagoon and a few other places like that, which are just things that, you can only get to on a sort of island volcanic nation. So we were there the longest, so there was probably the most to sort of talk about in Iceland. Obviously enjoyed everywhere that I went really, but Iceland was probably one of the highlights in terms of how different it is to all the other stuff that we were doing as well. So a lot of things we sort of tried to do were, things that we can't do in Australia. Australia's not a volcanic nation. We do have waterfalls, not like that really. Just, very, very different and very, very cool. And then we finished off the trip because, flying back from Iceland, it's quite far from Australia. It was a minimum of 3 flights to get back home. So we thought, may as well fly back into Europe somewhere, stay for a couple of nights and then fly back again. So we visited Switzerland on the way back. Again, very beautiful mountainous country, lots of cool stuff to see there. We were pretty tired by this point, so we just sort of chilled out a bit in Zurich, did some stuff on the lakes and stuff around there, and then flew back to Australia. So yeah, 6 countries visited throughout the trip in sort of that central European area. And I'd probably recommend going to all those countries and all those sort of cities. So I'm sure people from all those countries would be like, oh, I can't believe you just did like the touristy things. But because we were going to so many places, that's really what we wanted to just stick to, is like, you know, the main things that people thought were really cool and interesting. And so, yeah, that was the trip really. We were there for about 20 days and stuff, and it was all pretty smooth sailing, like no flight cancellations or delays or anything. Just everything worked out pretty well. Yeah, really enjoyed our time. So that was the first time ever that I've taken that amount of time off from it, like as long as like school or whatever. Never really did anything like that during uni. Didn't really take that sort of time off to go on holidays. So yeah, 3 weeks was certainly, by the end of it, I was like, yeah, probably don't need to do more than that. Like some people enjoy going and, you know, like going to places for long periods of time and really exploring cities and sitting around and relaxing and doing those sorts of things. I'm not really that sort of person that just likes to go somewhere and then just like sit around and sort of like relax by a pool or something. I'm much more of a like, oh, I should be doing something here. Because that's how you and I work, you know, like we're always doing things, we're always busy, there's always something to be done. And so on holiday, I sort of like to keep that sort of thing as well. So going around and seeing places, doing things, we filled our days doing things. There was a bit of rest here and there to sort of just like chill at a pub or whatever and have a beer. But outside of that, it was just like, here's a cool thing to see. Here's a museum. You know, we went to the Vienna Aquarium, which was super cool.
Okay.
You'd think an aquarium would be boring, but this is a really interesting aquarium. We did like a Cold War tour in Prague that was really interesting and cool. So we just did things like that in all the different cities and sort of, yeah, just kept ourselves busy and hit up the tourist things that people recommended. So yeah, all in all, great places, those places. So would recommend going there. So
nice.
That's the holiday.
Sounds like a blast.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, probably won't do a holiday like that for a little while. You know, come back and have the channel not performing as we would like was probably
well, I was about to say it's better than dealing with YouTube's bullshit. So
well, there was that. Like, I think when we were sort of chatting about the channel, it was right at the end of the holiday, so it wasn't really like, you know, oh, I've got to worry about that while I'm out sort of enjoying scenery and stuff like that. It was more just towards the end, but yeah, there's no real thing that I was sort of like, that was bad or I was disappointed doing that or sort of wasted my time doing that. Sort of, planned it out to hit a couple of days in each of the destinations and just sort of chill out and explore things. And
yeah, I was looking at some photos of the places and yeah, it looks pretty epic.
Yes, yeah, 100%. So yeah, if you can get to any of those places in your life, probably would recommend. I think if you're sort of, you know, as I said, Europeans are probably less interested in seeing castles and that sort of thing. Although if you're European, let me know. Do you enjoy going to those places and seeing old-timey castles and stuff? But yeah, if you are be more interested in seeing like Iceland and stuff like that, which yeah, it was just amazing. And first time ever driving on the right-hand side of the road, because in Australia we drive on the left, and I was sort of, yeah, a bit nervous renting a car and being like, oh, I'm having to drive on the other side of the road, but it was pretty much just second nature. So that was really no issue at all. So yeah, there was that. So fun times. What else is there to talk about? Not much. We've been going for an hour and 40 minutes anyway.
Yeah,
so
we'll save it for next week since we'll have one next week.
Yeah, and if people have any questions about stuff that we did in the holiday, maybe we'll talk about that, because I have like nothing planned. That was the plans of the year, really. So it's not like I'll be sitting around being like, oh, I was doing interesting things in the coming weeks. It's like I went on holiday, I came back, I felt a little scratchy, sick sort of thing, and then now I'm just like cracking back into work. I've got tons of work coming up, tons of videos in the works for Hardware Unboxed and Monster Unboxed for people to enjoy. So that's what I'll be getting stuck into. Thanks everyone that has listened to this episode until the end. As usual, we've got the usual feeds and stuff for people to get interested in. Obviously, we're on YouTube and audio feeds and that sort of thing. Patreon gives you access to the ad-free version of this and some other bonus stuff. So if you're interested in becoming a Patreon member. Aside from that, yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.